Some people know me as Commander Divine, retired Navy SEAL, but I'm marked to my tribe, people that I train. The thing that I'm really passionate about, Jared, is using the skills that I've developed, for 20 years as a SEAL leader and, very successful in that domain, number one in my training class, but, we can talk about why that came about. It wasn't just because I was some physical stud, but it was, the training that I'd done that was unique and distinct prior to me even joining the SEALs. And then, my lifetime of searching for development models that would accelerate my own growth, and not just accelerated learning, but, at a horizontal level, but vertical learning, meaning, trying to optimize who I could be. In the early days when I was into Zen, I called it enlightenment, but, that word has gotten a little bit stuck, and so I don't use it anymore. But the idea is just evolution of consciousness, and a constant and never-ending upward spiral of awareness. And then, that's done both through practice of my own, through interaction and teaching and mentoring and guiding and stumbling and failing and learning and, just living, just life.
Yeah.
So that's what I love to do, and I do that through business. I have three, but two kind of like businesses that are somewhat established. SealFit is one that you mentioned. We've been going for 10 years, training people in physical and mental toughness. And then the second is called Unbeatable. And my book, Unbeatable Mind, was kind of the genesis for that. And that's where I train people in this integrated life practice called Unbeatable Mind. And the third is KOKORO Yoga, which is our attempt to bring yoga to more men and more individuals who wouldn't necessarily find yoga or aren't appealing or don't find the current version of yoga in the States appealing, which has kind of become more of a studio-based fitness program. So we bring yoga back to a personal practice of self-evolution.
Yeah, it's so awesome. And the thing I love about you is for lack of better words, you're like a chameleon out there. You hear about when I read your stuff, I hear about your combat stories. I hear about the things you learned there. And then you start bringing in, yoga, and you start bringing in business, and you start bringing in breathing and all this just non-traditional stuff that you wouldn't think that a Navy SEAL would be talking about out there. And since you mentioned it, I want to go ahead and just dive into that. You talked about skills developed, and I know you're big on mastery, but you're also huge on situational awareness. And I can get how that's trained up in combat or, combat training, but you do an incredible job teaching people how to do this in the civilian world, where I think it would, frankly, just be much harder to teach people how to do this. And I'd love to hear about your color-coded system that I've read about where, it's all around situational awareness. But how does that work for people who actually get on board with that, they master it? And how's that really helped you in your own civilian life to teach that to others?
Well, you're right. It's in the military where the stakes are life and death, and then realize that going into combat, it's, awareness becomes everything. Because you got to be aware where the enemy is. We got to be aware where the bullets are coming in. You got to be aware of where your actions are having their effect. And you got to be aware of the state of your teammates. And if anyone's injured or, is having a psychological, kind of negative, reaction to the combat stress, which is very obviously common, as you can imagine. Most people would be curling up in the corner in utter abject fear. But Navy SEALs, we're trained to go into the firefight with confidence and in control. But as a leader, you got to be aware of all that, plus aware of what's going on in your own body-mind system so that you maintain control and you can lead. And so situational awareness is a skill and a practice in and of itself. So the skill is essentially to be able to determine the threat as well as the opportunities. And at the threat level, we have a way to kind of determine the level of the threat. And that's the color system that you alluded to. So, essentially white is, most people are in white. And this is like, there's no threat. And I'm also not aware that there could even be a threat. And so white is a very dangerous place to be. And we try to teach civilians to, at a minimum, get out of white and get into yellow. Now, yellow is,
just take a step back there, Mark. Would you say that most people, just in kind of general population civilization out there, kind of live in that white space?
Yeah, in the broadest sense. More and more people, because of what's happening in the world, are starting to seek out training like this and self-defense and whatnot. And so they're moving up until yellow. But, with the 7.5 billion people on the planet, I would say most are in survival mode and most are in white. Unless you're a wolf and you're out there preying on people, because wolves, generally speaking, live in yellow or orange. But there's a small percentage of the global population. So yeah, generally you're right. And so we want to move out of white, though. White is ignorance. White is, hey, I wake up, I take care of my own business. I don't, essentially it's just about me and survival. And it's very much of a self-centered, unaware way of living. And it's common, right? In fact,
Right.
Most people go through this in their, youth and their teens, and then they get out of it. But, you can get stuck there, and then you can get stuck there if your tribe or even country are stuck there. And if you just don't try to evolve. Now, you could even evolve and be like a super successful CEO and be in white. But, the bottom line is you often get poked pretty bad, so that you decide that you got to, step up your game, which is why you started your podcast, as a matter of fact. Right. So you went from white to yellow, and you focused those new skills of awareness on, learning how not to repeat those patterns and how to step up the game and to teach people to live at a higher level of awareness. So that level of awareness is to recognize that even if everything's okay, externally and internally, that the potential for homeostasis to be upset very quickly is always there. So you're always scanning. You're scanning for threats, and you're scanning for opportunities to keep things in balance and to move toward more balance or more health or, staying alive in the context of the Navy SEALs. So how does this look for the SEALs? Like, we're patrolling to the target, or we're in the Humvees and you're scanning, everything's good, but that your spidey sense could get triggered at any moment. And sure enough, when it does, that's like pinging the radar, meaning, you all seen the radars in a movie, and it's got like this flashing green line that goes around and around in a circle. But when it pings a threat, all of a sudden a sound happens and a little light starts showing up and like glowing, right? That's what yellow is like. When you ping a threat, then you go to orange. That means I go from relaxed awareness, scanning, but everything's fine. I'm going about my business. All of a sudden I ping a threat. Now I've got to focus on that threat. Now I go laser. Now, instead of a broad awareness where I'm sending all my energy just to collect information, now I collapse my focus onto that one threat. And literally, my eyes will start become more focused. I'll trigger the sympathetic nervous system. My range of vision will narrow, and I'll actually be blocking out other information, which, the Navy SEAL learns to keep those information loops open. But naturally, without training, they start to shut. And that's when you start to focus on that one threat. So for the SEAL, it might be, an ambush or, someone coming at them with a weapon or something like that. Or in business, it might be, a new competitor, or you realize that, people are leaving your service in droves because of, bad customer service, or, someone had a bad, blog post about it or something.
I was just about to ask you, much of the analogies that you're using here do have to deal with combat and how you're using that as far as situational awareness. I was just about to ask you, how would this play out for the normal civilian in business? And you just kind of hit the nail on the head there. When you keep talking about threats, it's more about things that could pop up on the radar that could sabotage where it is that we're going.
It's very easy for me to make the transition or to correlate the business, because I've actually, not only was I SEAL for 20 years, but I've been in business for both before I was a CPA.
Which I was amazed to hear when I first heard that. I don't even know when I heard it. I was like, wait, that can't be the same Mark Devine that I know from the
I wasn't a CPA for a long time, for 4 years. And a lot of the time was, getting my MBA and, working full time and getting my CPA. But it was very formative business experience. I got a lot of clients, a lot of exposure. And then because half my SEAL career was active duty and half reserve, and then just a couple of years of my reserves was I mobilized over, to active duty for a year. So during my reserve period, I had time to get back into business. And so that's when my entrepreneurial career started. So I've started, 6 different businesses. Coronado Brewing Company is probably the most successful these days. I'm not involved anymore. The point about situational awareness, I learned a ton about that, about emotional awareness, And so now I'm able to much more, I get triggered, when I feel like I'm getting into business with someone who's not trustworthy, or, I'm much more inclined to do my due diligence and look at potential partners as a threat. They're both an opportunity and a threat, but you know what? If you get into business with them without fully vetting them and understanding who they are, then that threat become really very real. That's what happened with me. And other business that I've started, in fact, that's where my books came from, is because I started to really think deeply about my experience as a warrior, not just a SEAL, but a martial artist and even a yogi, because yoga is the progenitor to all martial arts. And so when you trace it back, all those skills, which I've had a deep connection with for now 25 to 30 years, have made me a much more effective businessman. And I wanted to share that information with people, because the world today, as you're aware, Jared, is starting to look a lot like a battlefield. It's getting very complex and it's accelerating. And the skills that the SEALs had learned naturally over the years to make us dominate the field of our, maritime special operations are very, very useful for businesses and entrepreneurs and, for CEOs and pretty much anybody, actually. But, I'm kind of focusing on professionals and elite athletes and whatnot. They're very useful, and I'm able to kind of translate them and distill them and take some of the mystery out of it, you know?
Yeah. When I started really digging into your story a while back and just learned, number one, hopefully the listeners are picking up on this as well. There's so many layers to you. You think a lot of times about guys in the military, maybe they come out and they start a business. A lot of them don't, a lot of them just kind of blend into society and try to learn how to live back in civilian life. I mean, you've got so much depth to you, and that's why I wanted to get you on the podcast, because I think there's such a message there for my listeners to hear. And you're real big on lists, you're big on routines, you're real big on kind of the warrior spirit, which I hope we get into here in just a second. I read an article, gosh, it was a while back, maybe, I hope I'm not butchering this. I think it was Jerick Robbins, maybe, for Huffington Post, wrote this article, and he said that there were some tips that you had to really get started. And I think a lot of this does center around situational awareness. It all ties in together to making us better, right? But there were tips to really keys to success in there. And I don't remember exactly what it was talking about, but I think it was breath control, which I was just talking to my good friend just the other day about your box breathing, Drew Canoli out at Organifi, about your box breathing. And I heard about that a while back, and just
Drew's
the power
great.
of breath.
Yeah,
he's an awesome guy. So breath control, positive internal dialogue, which you don't hear a lot of guys in the military talking about that. A lot of those guys think that's woo, and you just don't hear them coming out and talking about it. Imagery, I know you're huge on imagery. And then I think the last one was just creating small goal or micro goals, maybe.
Right.
And there's just so much depth to that. If those are the four things, and I don't know where Jerick got those, if he interviewed you personally or not, but that just kind of, it really started letting me see the inside of your mind and how you work, and how a guy can go and be a businessman, CPA, Navy SEAL, MBA, all those sort of things, and then come back and run businesses, but then also have the depth to him to say, look, I'm going to do yoga. I'm going to have situational awareness, breath control, internal dialogue, powerful imagery, those sort of things. What do you think spawns that on for you today in civilian life? You're 50. I heard at one point, how old are you?
53 now. Yeah.
53 years old. So what do you think spawns that on for you? Probably some of it is just your personal wiring and your inner workings, but obviously you're getting some value out of that, or you wouldn't keep pursuing this, these keys to success in life. But talk to us a little bit about how you feel like those things and other things you're doing right now, situational awareness included, make you successful to just be the best version of you can be each day.
So over the years, and kind of reflecting and teaching and with the teaching of SEAL candidates and then others, elite athletes and teams, and I've done literally thousands of events since the mid 2000s, and just had some incredible success with teaching. Like our SEAL trainees, the trainees that I teach to go into the SEAL program, have a 90% success rate getting through the SEALs. And I largely focus on those 4 skills that you alluded to, which I'm going to come back to. And so all the teaching that I taught them was stuff that I had learned, or that I learned because I needed to teach them. And, meaning I had to go deeper into a concept that I was familiar with, but I needed to own it, right? And so it's like there's a lot of things that we are aware of in the world, but we don't know it. You don't know something until you can master it and teach it. And so because I knew what worked for me to become, to sail through SEAL training, literally, I mean, we had 185 go through my training class back in 1990, and 19 graduated, and I graduated number 1 in my class. When I looked back at that years later, because I started to teach SEALs, candidates that is, I had to ask myself, why was that? Was it just because I was a really good athlete? I don't think so, right? Was it just because I was smart? I don't think so, because all the other candidates were good athletes and all the other candidates were smart. What I was able to boil it down to was those 4 skills. And I'd learned those 4 skills, or variations of them, through my martial arts training predominantly, and a little bit through my competitive swimming and rowing, because I had some great coaches. Now, so what are those skills? You alluded to the first, the master skill, was to control my physiology and to calm my mind, I should say, through breath control. And I later developed that practice called box breathing, which now has almost starting to become like common lexicon. I can't trademark it, and I love everyone to do it. But I started the practice of box breathing when I went into the SEALs, because I learned how powerful breathing was when I was doing my martial arts to keep my body calm and my mind calm in a fight. And I thought, well, this is, I'm going into the SEALs. BUDS is a fight. The BUDS training is the SEAL training. Right. And of course, I need that for combat. So by slowing down your breathing through your nostrils, and holding the breath on the inhale and the exhale for a short period of time. And I recommend doing it at a ratio of 1-1-1-1, meaning one same duration of inhale, hold, exhale, and hold. Now, there are other
equal parts.
Yeah, there are other ways to breathe where you can change up that ratio, which will have different effects. But the 1-1-1-1 kind of is a balanced breath, and it leads to very calm, clear-headed, results. So I started this practice, like I said, before I went to the SEALs. I continued it every day while I was in the SEALs, and it just had a profound, utterly profound effect on my body-mind system. I was, every time I do it, which is all the time now, and I practice it several times a day, I'm rewiring my nervous system by triggering my parasympathetic nervous system, which is rest, digest, and, calming everything down, bringing into balance. Also, my brain is calming down. My mind is getting into balance. I'm getting clear. And you're also relearning how to breathe. So you're slowing down your breath. My typical breathing pattern is about 5 times per minute. The average person breathes 16 to 20 times per minute. Also, I'll get unless I'm talking, I'll be getting this nice, deep, full breath, lots of, full oxygen, and I'll get a full, complete exhale. So I'm not leaving any toxicity in my lungs. So that's the physical benefits of box breathing. But
by the way, I think it's amazing how, since you're talking about breathing, I can hear both of us consciously breathing harder,
sure.
but just because you're talking about it.
Yeah. It's a great focus of awareness. So it spills over into concentration and meditation training, and it really helps clear your mind. And it's a bridge between the body, the mind, and the spirit, ultimately. And I learned that through practice over the years. So that was critical. And when I teach, even if the students that I work with just do that, it's transformational. So I've got doctors who are, now box breathing during surgery, and attorneys who breathe to prepare for trial and during trial, and, business people who prepare for board meetings and presentations. And it's a powerful, powerful practice. So then the breathing kind of gets you control over your body mind system, but it doesn't really address the quality of your thinking.
Right.
It will clear your mind, but you can still have damaging thoughts. What I learned in the SEALs, and starting, really before that in my martial arts, and then, of course, athletics, which is why they're such great preparatory type experiences, was that negativity will destroy performance. Negativity will weaken you. The field of kinesthetics has proven this. If you think a negative thought, you go weak, your body goes weak. If you think a positive thought, it goes strong. Same thing, if you eat negative food like sugar, your body goes weak, at an energetic level. So the way you think, how you think, the quality of your thinking is extremely important. And my book, Unbeatable Mind, is all about how to think well and how to act with power. So the skill to practice is positive internal dialogue. Now, we start that with a trigger. We'd say, what wolf are you feeding? The courage wolf or the fear wolf? If you're feeding fear, it means you're talking negatively, like, I can't do this. And I don't mean verbally, although that's certainly a very outer expression of it. Like if you're around someone who's negative or really down, or like in a sporting event, saying verbally, I can't do this. Now, that's a clear case of feeding the fear wolf. And, if you're a good teammate, you'll shake them out of that really quickly. And that's, some of our SEAL Fit training teaches people to be, as teammates, keep their teammate positive and motivated and get over the humps that are going to cause them to quit or to degrade their performance. But what I'm speaking mostly about, Jared, is learning to pay attention to your thoughts and to notice any time that you veer into negative or just less than optimal thoughts, and then to interdict that and redirect it and come back to a positive thought. Now, in order to come back to a positive thought, you have to know what you should be thinking about, right? And that's where the task orientation and the micro goals come in. So I like to say, you always need to know why you're doing something or why something's happening to you. And so in order to do that, you need to have a clear reason for doing something. So you have to have a focus on one thing at a time. Now, for me, going through SEAL training, my focus was to become a Navy SEAL, but that's a 9-month program. And so, what can I do today to become a Navy SEAL? Well, it's to finish today. It's to get through today without getting injured or quitting or getting dropped. And so in order for me to get through today, I have to get through this evolution. And each event they called an evolution because it was meant to evolve you. So whether it's a 5-mile timed run or a 2-mile ocean swim or, the obstacle course sprint or, even a class on diving or an actual dive or, shooting evolution, all you need to do is focus on getting through this evolution. And then you can break it down even further, within the evolution, all I got to do is get through this one action, right? So we kind of choose the smallest arc of action, the smallest goal that's going to lead you toward success in the next larger goal, which is going to lead you toward success in the next larger goal, which is going to lead you to your ultimate objective. So we call that micro goals and target acquisition. That is a critical skill because all of that is tied to a larger purpose. And for me, it was to become a Navy SEAL. But I didn't go wake up every day saying, I'm going to become a Navy SEAL. I knew I was going to become a Navy SEAL because I knew that also in order to get there, all I had to do was get through the next evolution and crush it. And then the next one and the next one. And that eventually, with that day in and day out focus, I would be a Navy SEAL. And that ties directly back to my martial arts training where my mentor, Master Nakamura, said 1 day, 1 lifetime. And what he meant by that is every day is a lifetime of opportunity, a lifetime of learning. And oh, by the way, in the warriors world, it could actually be your last day because of the job that we've committed to or our service to protect our fellow man and woman. And so, let's make this day count. And in order to make the day count, you got to make every moment count. And in order to make every moment count, you got to stay present and in control. You got to control your mind and your emotions. So those are 3 of those skills. And the 4th one is, how do you use your imaging, and can you use the imaging to remember a more powerful past, which is going to present you with more energy in the present, and also create an image of the future so that you actually can remember your future in the present so that you have this awesome power because you don't have any debilitating energy from regrets or feelings of being less than from your past, which most people do, quite frankly, because nobody has a perfect childhood or everyone screws up royally in life. And if you don't, you're lying,
Yeah, you're absolutely kidding yourself.
You say you don't, you're kidding, right? The point is we're supposed to learn from it, not beat ourselves up. But most people beat themselves up, and then they remember that as a bad event or a horrible thing that happened to them, or they're a victim, or they were shamed or abused. And a lot of these are horrible things, but the more you remember them and store that memory as bad as horrible, then it's just like, just stringing all these kettlebells onto your ankles, and now you're trudging through life, dragging all these kettlebells. So the warrior master skill that we teach is to go back and essentially remember these in a way that's going to give you power instead of debilitate you. That's part of this 3rd skill of imaging. And then also, because we're going somewhere, we've got a clarity about our future. We're warriors. We know what our mission looks like. We've got a vision for victory. We win it in our mind. So we see what victory looks like. I knew what it looked like for me to become a Navy SEAL. I had visualized it for 2 years straight, every single day as a practice, until I felt it at a deep level that I was going to be a Navy SEAL because I had already done the work. I had won in my mind before stepping into the battlefield. So then I had to remember what it meant to win every day while I was going through the motions of task orientation, keeping my breath, body, mind in control, right? And feeding the courage wolf. And these skills are like unbelievably powerful. I mean, I consider them to be total flow activators because when I use these skills, when I teach them and they're practiced so that you own them, then with just the intention of clicking into the skills, you essentially enter that lofty, what's the word I'm looking for? Coveted flow state that, everyone is talking about. I just did a podcast with my friend Jamie Wheel, and he and Stephen Cotter have written this really cool book called Stealing Fire, where they're talking about how SEALs and lead athletes and all these others kind of enter peak and flow states to do their work.
I can't wait to get my hands on it. I've heard so many good things about it.
Yeah, I think it's a great book, but the reality is they're still looking at it as a unique skill that these people have. Whereas what I'm teaching is that anybody has that skill. Anybody can do that. They just have to practice it. It's a set of tools to shift your consciousness, shift your perspective, shift your mind. And those 4 skills of breath control, positive self, internal dialogue, managing the image, managing your imagery so you have power in the present, and then task orientation and focusing on the smallest arc of micro tasks that will lead, link one goal in victory to the next goal until you have so much momentum that you can't fail.
Yeah, man, that's such good. I mean, there's so much depth to all of that. And the one thing that I really loved about that is just evolution at every step means you're growing, right? I mean, what if we just took every day and dissected it that way, looking at failure not as the end result, but as feedback.
Yeah,
not getting
that's all it is. Failure's not an option. In the SEALs, we used to say failure's not an option. Everyone would say, well, that means you can't fail the mission. And what we would say, if, the thoughtful Navy SEALs, and I'd like to think that I was one of them, would say, no, what that really means is the concept of failure is not an option. We want to push failure. We want to plan to fail because that's how we're going to learn how to get to victory faster.
Yeah, if you're not failing, you're not trying.
Right.
Many people in the business world would say, I'm going to mention two things. One of them is mastery. I know, as I mentioned before, you're huge on mastery. There was a story I heard about you at one point. There's a high altitude jump out of a helicopter. You saw one of your unit members displaying ultimate mastery that stuck with you. So that's number one. And then I'll mention the second one, and that is the acronym BOO that I want you to go over with my listeners.
Well, this is cool because the guy who did the jump, his name was Lou, and then we're going to talk about BOO. So we're going to talk about Lou and BOO. So this is an example of mastery. Now, there's mastery over a skill, but in the mastering of the skill, you got to master the man or the woman, right? So mastery of a skill, like Miyamoto Musashi said, is better to do 100,000 sword strikes. No, it's better to do one sword strike 100,000 times than 100,000 sword strikes one time, because the first will lead to mastery, not only of that sword strike, but of the mind of the individual, of the warrior who's perfecting the sword strike. Right?
Which the second part is more important. I would think you would agree.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because then that skill will extend to anything. You can, once you master the mind, you can master any skill.
Right.
The sword strike is just the tool. It could be, wax on, wax off, like in Karate Kid. It could be washing dishes. I've said this, used this story a number of times, but it's probably not true, but there might be, like a lot of these stories, there might be an element of truth to it. But this dunce monk showed up at a monastery, wanting to join the monastery. And he was like, substandard IQ. And so the other, monks were a little full of themselves because they had, very intelligent and studied, and they do, they were like monk-like. And so they said, well, this monk, he's just a dunce, so we'll make him wash our dishes. So they put him in the kitchen to wash dishes. Well, the dunce monk was happy to do that. He happily washed dishes. He just wanted to be there. And so, but what he did know was the Hail Mary. And so every single dish he washed, he would say Hail Mary while he's washing it, right? And so this is no different than wax on, wax off, or Musashi's, 100,000, swings of one sword strike. His was 100,000 Hail Marys a day while he's washing dishes. And 10 years later, that guy was the head monk because he had developed his mind through that one single practice. One single practice.
Wow.
That's powerful. Now back to Mike Liu. Mike is a friend of mine. I haven't seen him in a few years, but he was my free fall instructor when I was a young Green SEAL. He had been in the SEALs for some time by then. I don't know exactly how many, probably like 10 years, and I was just coming in. And he had, thousands of free fall jumps. It was a passion of his. And so he was my chaser. So every time we jumped during free fall training, we had an instructor who would be our chaser, and that was just in case something went wrong and, you weren't able to pull your parachute, or the AFF, which is the automatic activation device, AAD actually failed. So they would chase and kind of pull it for you if possible. Didn't always work out that way, by the way. So anyways, we did a pre-dawn jump. It was spectacular. So it was night jump. We had chem lights on. And so we jump out of the airplane at like 18,000 feet, pitch dark. But then, right as we're jumping, the sun is kind of like cracking the horizon. So there's a little bit of that pre-dawn, light in the sky. And so I jump out, and I'm good enough. This is like our, 30th jump. And so I'm good enough to start to do 360s and to do some stuff in the air. And so I'm basically supposed to demonstrate.
You're getting ballsy.
Yeah, I'm getting ballsy, and I'm having fun. And so I get out there, and I'm flying around. I feel like I'm flying. We have 17,000 feet, got about a minute and a half, a little bit more of free fall. And so I'm doing my 360, and then I stop, and I'm supposed to check in with Lou. So in one of these 360s, I do a full 360, and I come back to my starting point. And what I'm staring at is Lou, not in a horizontal position like you normally expect, but he's standing toe to earth. And he's just like standing there. This is the trippiest thing. And then he smiles at me, like a little twinkle in his eye, and he like wiggles his finger, and he does a full flip and comes back to that standing position like that.
Wow.
And I remember thinking to myself, what the bleep? Like, I can't even confabulate how he did that, but it was just total mastery over his body-mind system and situational awareness while falling 120 miles per hour toward the earth.
That's incredible.
And to be able to maintain that discipline, of body position, to maintain, to have that foot to earth, for anyone who's parachute jumped knows how challenging that is. So that was, like, to me, a great example early in my SEAL career of, like, wow, mastery, when you really love something and you're passionate about it and you just train at it relentlessly like Lou did, then you can do things which are really, really, really uncommon. And it reminded me, again, of my martial arts teacher, who was a grandmaster, who created the whole style of karate called Seido, who exhibited the same qualities. Now, he didn't exhibit it parachuting, but he exhibited it in his teaching and in the way he could demonstrate his skills of karate. I mean, some extraordinary things that he could do. I mean, I watched him put his leg through 6 massive blocks of ice. Every one of, 99.9999% of humanity who tried to do that would instantly split their femur in half. And he literally just cut through it like butter. And that was mastery. Now, mastery, like I said, can show up and be displayed in many ways. I've seen it so often in the SEALs. Most SEALs, not all, but most SEALs attain some level of mastery over a skill, whether that be jumping, diving, or leading. And ultimately, every one of those people who attains mastery has to master the internal domain. And each one of those 4 skills that we went through are involved at some level. So that's that. And then, you asked about Boo. So one of the things that we try to teach, mastery is an integrative thing, right? So you can't attain mastery and not be physically adept, right?
Right.
You can't develop mastery without being mentally acute and developing control over your mind and improving the quality of your thinking and those things that we've already talked about. And as you develop mastery, you find that you become much more intuitive and instinctually oriented, and you experience, like, life in a more spiritual oriented way, if that makes any sense. Like, things, you feel more connected. You feel like there's energy that flows between all things, and there's intelligence in the universe. Like, it's just these experiences that are hard to put words to start showing up in your life. And we know you can't test it with a scientific instrument. And, you may doubt it, but the reality is you can't deny that your life starts to be experienced more spiritually. Am I right? That's probably happened to you. And many people listening will be like nodding their head. But the one piece that really trips people up is the emotional development, is emotional control. And so when I teach at Unbeatable Mind, I say we have 5 mountains that we need to master, and then we integrate them. Those 5 mountains are your physical being, and that's including your health, your physiological balance, as well as mastering functional movement. Now, you don't have to be an elite CrossFitter to do that. You just need to master functional movement so you can move more effectively, so you can sit in meditation more effectively, so you avoid injury and illness, so you can live a long and productive, happy life. Now, that seems like a nice goal, doesn't it? So physical mountain is really important, but what we notice is that once you start doing the physical, then it has a spillover effect to a healthier mind. Of course, the brain, the items of your mind, are the primary items of your mind, or organs of your mind, are your brain, your heart, and your belly. Each one of them has neurons and neurological processing, but also your spinal cord, your entire nervous system, and your body are part of your brain system. And so as your body improves, so does your mind. And then we start to train the mind through the breathing and through meditation and concentration and then content. And so that mental mastery is important. Now, I've already mentioned intuitive mastery and spiritual mastery. Now, there's some ways to train that, probably beyond the scope of this call, but, those are important. But the emotional one, in particular, men tend to avoid that because, you have to get into those sticky feelings, right? That's what I mean by BOO. So BOO is an acronym for background of obviousness. And what I mean by that is, like, most of us are inside the bottle. We can't read the label of our own emotional life. And so therefore we tend to repeat patterns that trip us up and cause problems. But if we were just to go ask somebody else, for instance, an expert or our family or, teammates, hey, what do you see as my patterns and issues that I could improve? What do you think I do repeatedly, or what do you see in me that could, that is blind to me, that's not obvious to me, but is obvious to you? And chances are good that they're going to tell you, and you're going to get everyone to tell you certain things that you can't see in yourself, but they can see very clearly, just like you can see patterns in them that they can't see, because those patterns are just, you're blind to them. You can't see them recurring for some reason.
Right.
It's kind of like saying, we have every day we have like 80,000, between 60 and 80,000 thoughts, and 80% of them are the same ones we had yesterday. But it's the same with our emotions, because thoughts and emotions are two sides of the same coin. Our thoughts.
And for most people, most of them are negative.
Yeah, and they can be negative. And so if you have negative dialogue, then you're going to have negative emotions. If you have negative emotions, you're going to have negative dialogue, because one spurs the other and they go around in a spiral. We call that looping. And most people are just looping their way through life, repeating negative patterns and wondering why they don't have the success that maybe you and I are experiencing, because we've committed to overcoming those patterns. It doesn't mean we're perfect. In fact, we acknowledge that we're all flawed. And that gives us more a sense of urgency to do the self-awareness, to get deep into the inner domain and understand what patterns have been driving our life, to overwrite, negative patterns or dysfunctional patterns or patterns that aren't serving us, and write a new story, write a new script, become the author of our own novel and begin to write that script, and then living that script, practicing that script, habituating it, and then showing up with much more power. So that's what I mean by boo. And it's probably the hardest part of our training, because, it takes real courage to face, your past and face the limitations that have been caused by, let's say early childhood trauma, or, growing up without, with a single parent or with no parents, or doing, even doing despicable things that you're so ashamed of that you're like, okay, some people can never recover from that. But hey,
right.
We are not an event. We are, much bigger than that, and we can change. And it's a choice.
Yeah, I think Zig Ziglar said the event doesn't define us. Yesterday was really yesterday. It's past. Today is a new day. Mark, as we get ready to wrap up the podcast, what would you tell us about capturing, I guess, youthfulness and mastering control of our body, as you've talked about already here, mindset, psyche, all of that, so that we can be maximum versions of ourselves? I mean, so many people get worn out as they get older, as we were talking about a little bit offline. You seem, I could be mislabeling this, you know yourself better than anybody, but you seem to internally get younger. I mean, at 50-something years old, it just seems like you're learning so much, you're pushing through so much, you're mastering so many things. How do you do it? How do you keep pressing the body and the mind more and keep recharging as you get older?
I do think that you can get younger every year. I don't know what the limits are. Like, I'm not going to make some bold, crazy statement that, we can be immortal or anything like that, but I do think, especially where we're going with technology, that, we have the capacity to live well beyond 100, and even, I'm thinking 150 to 200 years old with ease, but it requires a whole different way of living, and so what I've tried to implement in my life, it's a number of things, and these aren't in any order, and this isn't like a training program, but they're all incredibly important. One is to fuel myself in a unique way. Like, I eat a lot less than most people eat. I think that we've been tricked into thinking we need a lot more food than we do need. And so, today I've eaten essentially an ample, which is a product that I'm fully excited about. It's like a very, very healthy whole food meal in a bottle, which makes it very easy for me as a busy person to, grab one and drink it through my, before, during, and after, or after my morning workout. And now I've got, that has become my breakfast and lunch. And then I eat light, right? So I eat less. I also intermittent fast. I don't eat anything from 7 p.m.-ish to about, 10, 11 in the morning until after my workout or during. And then another thing is I eat a lot more fat. So I'm ketogenic most of the time, but not all the time. Yeah. And this has had an effect on my body to where, I just don't have to spend as much energy digesting heavy foods. Now, it doesn't mean I don't have a steak every once in a while or whatnot. But
what is your typical diet to stay in the state of ketosis where intermittent fasting gets you there, right?
Intermittent fasting plus this ample, which has become a staple every day, one bottle of ample. And then I have, like a paleo meal during the day with everything, fat, protein, and some carbohydrates. And I practice the 80-20 rule, meaning, I'm not a strict dietitian. I think diets are a waste of time. But I generally eat whole foods. I eat less than most people want because I'm not hungry. But I don't, avoid a pizza every once in a while. I think it's fine because it's fun. I don't I don't eat for pleasure, but once in a while it's like, okay, I'll have pizza and a beer because I'm out with my family and it's fun. So that's one aspect, is to eat really well, but don't be obsessive about it. But I think the key thing there is to eat less and to fast intermittently and to take some days off where you just eat, just drink fluids and let your body reset.
So you said today you've had ample,
Right.
and I'll link that up in the show notes as
Cool.
well.
Yeah.
Is that kind of your typical, I mean, you're a pretty ripped up dude, right? I mean, you don't maintain that type of muscle density not eating a ton of food, but at the same time, I know there's a ton of benefits recently for me in intermittent fasting and learning the benefits of that. Is that your typical day, is you'll try to just eat as few things as possible and maintain that?
Yes, but it's not hard and it's not so much conscious. It's just I'm not hungry. It's weird. I think it's a training thing. Over the years, I work out really hard, but because I eat a lot of fat and I do the intermittent fasting and I've kind of trained my body to eat less food than other people, it doesn't mean that I'm a skinny, wiry little guy. I'm 195 pounds and I'm strong as an ox, well, maybe not as an ox. And there's a lot of people stronger than I am, but I maintain my strength and I can routinely, compete with 20-year-old CrossFitters or SEAL candidates, and they'll beat me because they're 20, but I can still hold my own. I can, sometimes I beat them when it's a stamina or longer thing because, I do better on the longer stuff. But when it's a 12-minute WOD, I'm not far behind. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's one, is the fueling. And then the second is I train every day. Consistency of physical training, but the movements, it's like very CrossFit and SEAL Fit inspired. It's different every day. It's intuitively led. I used to use a training plan, but now I don't need to. I can intuitively know what's going to work for my body, what movements I need to do, whether I need to go super short and tense or maybe a little bit more of a stamina, what strength movements I need to work on. And so, I've kind of mastered that to where I can do what I need to do. Now, the only thing that trips me up is when I travel. I've been doing a lot of travel, so I stay consistent with my movement when I travel, but that's when I do all the body weight in the KOKORO yoga and stuff. So that's number 2. Third is the breathing practice. I honestly think this is probably this is where everyone listening should start. There's so much benefit activating a daily box breathing practice. So I do box breathing at least twice a day, sometimes longer. And always when I travel and when I'm driving or doing things that are not, repetitive type things, and I'm always practicing my box breathing. And that has amazing effect on stimulating your immune system and your parasympathetic system and just keeping you really focused. So that's critical. And then meditation, of course. Now, this I combine with my box breathing. So I'll start with the box breathing. And when I'm done, I'll just slide into a meditative practice, depending on what I'm working on. And that can include concentration, presence, aka mindfulness, or a visualization. And
are you using an app or a system for that?
No. I think an app can be a distraction for meditation.
Yeah.
I do use an app. We have an app for Unbeatable Mind for box breathing, so I use that. That's helpful.
Is that public? Where people can find it?
It's available. It's a partner of ours named Dave D'Souza created it. But if you search for box breathing or Dave D'Souza Unbeatable Mind, one of those in the App Store, you'll find it. There is another app which I've always been a fan of too, and it's called it's made by Sagara, Saagara. The Unbeatable Mind app has some gamification built in, so you can kind of track your progress and like attain a black belt, which is pretty cool. So, and then, I have a ritualized battle rhythm where I have a morning ritual and evening ritual to bookend the day. This comes from the 1 day, 1 life principle. And the morning ritual is when I do my box breathing and I do some meditation, and I start every day with drinking, 12 to 18 ounces of fresh water to kind of stimulate my electrical system and to, cleanse my system and to refuel, like top off the water. And then the most important thing, though, is that's when I check in with my personal ethos. So I've developed a personal ethos, and this is another part of our training at Unbeatable Mind Academy, is that, we develop a personal ethos that guides our behavior, becomes like a guardrail for us every day when the storms and the winds pick up and we get confused, and we come back to our ethos and say, oh yeah, that's right, that's who I am. And so that is a deep reflection on why you're on this planet, what your purpose is, and then clarity around how you're going to fulfill that purpose with passion. So I might think my purpose is to be a warrior and leader, but how am I going to do that? For a while it was to be a Navy SEAL, but now I'm not a Navy SEAL. So how am I going to continue to be a warrior and a leader with passion. Well, it's through teaching these principles. And then speaking of principles, the third P is the principles that guide my behavior. And those are like our values, the value set of honor and courage and humility and discipline and commitment, right? Those are the things that I reflect upon every day, and I build them into my mental, toolkit. And so every morning I reflect upon that, and then I check in with my vision for the future so that I can remember the future. And that future is full of power and, victory, right? These are the practices. In the evening, the last thing I'll mention, the evening ritual is to look back at the day and say, okay, what went well? What didn't go well? What did I learn? What do I need to continue to learn? And what's unfinished, unresolved, right? And then that allows for an incredible night's sleep, which is kind of the last component, which is to make sure that you're getting recovery. Sleep is critical. Recovery time from physical training is critical. So even though I train every day, it doesn't mean I'm training a hardcore metabolic, intense WOD every day. No, I might do 4 of those a week. I might do one long, slow one. I might just do some active recovery yoga or a ruck or swim, so I balance everything out. So you're getting tons of recovery time. So the yin and the yang. So you got to work hard physically, and then you take time off and restore with breath, with meditation, with imagery, with a float in the float tank or a massage. And I do all of that stuff. And boy, the combination of all that is just super powerful. And, I do feel like every year I'm a little bit younger and a little bit stronger and a little bit more clear-headed.
Yeah, that's awesome. How much sleep are you getting each night, Mark?
I endeavor to get to, I would love to get to bed at 10, but often that slides to 10:30 or so. And then I'm awake by, 6:30. So that means 7.5 to 8 hours. And
that's awesome.
Usually the first 4 hours are the most important. So usually that's a pretty good chunk for me. And then sometimes I'll wake up and then go back to sleep again. When I travel, sleep is a challenge. So it's not always optimal. I'm not saying I'm perfect again.
But you're fighting for it. You're
fight
fighting
for
to get
that. Yeah, sleep is the one that is, I think every one of us struggle for it because we have so much distraction and so much electronic clutter and so much stimulus in our life. So, I sleep really well when I unplug from it all for 24 hours. But when I'm plugged in, you really got to protect your sleep space, completely black it out. Make sure it's cool. You should sleep in like 68 degrees. No electronics in your room whatsoever. No ambient lights. No things buzzing or pinging. Your phone needs to go. Meditation also doesn't need to be a Herculean task. It's much more effective to do 5 minutes a day, every day, than to do 1 2-hour session a week. So consistency of daily effort is key. And I will ask this, because when you said, what if someone poo-poos it or just doesn't think it's valuable? And I would say to them, if you're getting the unbelievable, incredible, fantastic, amazing results out of life that you know is possible, if you feel like you're 100% optimized as a human and you're wealthy, you've got $10 million in the bank and you've got an unbelievable body and you've got the perfect girlfriend or boyfriend and your kids are wonderful if you have them and everyone loves you. If you are that person and you're doing it without meditating, just keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
But if you're not,
I don't know that person, by the way.
I don't know him either, right? And so it's like what Einstein said, if you expect different results by continuing to do what you're already doing, that's the definition of insanity. So why not try something different? Now, what I believe, and based upon my experiences, all the way from sailing through SEAL training, I will 100% say that the reason that I dominated my BUDS class and graduated #1 all those years ago is because I meditated diligently every day for 4 years prior to that training. And
did you have guys around you when you were doing that thought it was just a waste of time?
Well, it wasn't even anything that was talked about. I had done it and I did it while I was at BUDS. Everyone else just did their thing. And they didn't even know I was doing it, because I did it in my room in the morning, and I would do it when I was on a run, because meditation is just a certain way you use your brain. And once you train your brain that way, then you can meditate, like even the Buddhists teach mindful walking is meditation, and going on a long ocean swim, 6-hour swim, and, for 3 hours of it, I was in deep meditation, but my body was still moving, fast. And so It's really a way of using your brain that becomes extremely useful to you. And what you find is that You develop the capacity to think better, to see things that other people don't see, to see patterns, to feel things that are people don't feel, to use your emotions, for power instead of, for debilitating yourself. You're much more intuitive and instinctual. And so sometimes, like I had experiences where like I really wouldn't be here today if I hadn't meditating. One experience that I often talk about, but I had many of these was, one day I was walking up to the shooting range and I felt like someone put a hand on my shoulder and said, "Stop, Mark." And I stopped in my tracks. And as soon as I stopped, a 9 mil round was accidentally discharged from a friend of mine, who was standing behind me. And it literally went right by my ear to where I could feel the wind. And, that next step would have put my head right into the trajectory of that bullet.
Wow.
That was because I had taken the time to slow down, clear my head, and to meditate. And so when you do that, your body mind system just starts to operate at a whole new level. And it's incredible. And what I'll say to finish this off is we are heading into a very, very dynamic and challenging time for business, for humans in general. And it's not going to change. It's not like we're going to go through it and come out the other side and things are going to be normal. Like this is just going to get faster and faster. And we're right at the bottom of the J curve in this age of acceleration. It's already on us for people who are able to look into the future and see it, but it's going to hit most of humanity like a tsunami. And the only thing I can offer is that the skills that we talked about today will help you navigate it. It's kind of like downloading new software and upgrading your consciousness so that you can be aware and navigate that complexity of that VUCA world, the volatile, uncertain, changing, and ambiguous world. And you're going to do it with grace and with humility like a warrior.